All right, and we are live. Hello, everybody. Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another live stream. Some very sobering news from the Middle East today to go over, and it's not looking good, folks. Bottom line up front, we're getting very, very close to this conflict in the Middle East breaking out into a large-scale regional war, and this will have massive impacts on the global economy, impacts which up until now have not been priced into these markets, I don't believe. So we're going to take a look at the developments of the day and why this is getting so dangerous, and we'll take a look at some of the market action today as well and see what we can glean from this. Do me a favor and just put a 1 in the chat if everything is working here tech-wise. You can hear me okay, and everything looks good on the screen. Now, what we're looking at here is a Twitter account. It's called Iran Observer. Now, disclaimer here, obviously stuff that's being shared on social media, I haven't verified, so if any of this is not what it, is claimed to be on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days, that may well be the case, but I just want to go over what's going on right now. Thanks for everybody I see popping up in the chat there with the ones. All right, so what's going on? We've got, according to the Iran Observer here, the West Bank burning. You can see this footage here looking pretty bad there. Significant civil unrest in Tehran. You've got protests in front of the French embassy in Turkey. Crowds attacking the Israeli embassy in Tehran. Here we go again. The French embassy getting swarmed. Residents of Turkey head towards a military base where U.S. soldiers are stationed. So what is driving all of this chaos? I mean, there's lots of video footage from around the web. Of course, one thing, that you can't really trust during a time of war conflict like this is any information you receive. You have to take a large grain of salt with all of this information. But one thing we know for sure is that the situation is devolving by the day. And this unrest that we are witnessing across the Middle East is the result of a strike on a Gaza hospital, the Ali Al-Arabi Hospital. And before we go any further, there's a lot of blame game going on here. The Israelis are claiming this was a failed Hamas strike. Of course, Hamas claiming this was an Israeli strike. I'm not an expert on the matter. I'm not there, so the blame game can go on all you want. But first, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that this was, 500 people who were taken out as a result of forces beyond their control, and we should all have a tremendous amount of sympathy for everybody who suffers as a result of this conflict, especially the civilian population who likely did very little to bring this upon themselves. But this hospital had not been evacuated. It was hit by a large caliber munition from one side or the other, and a large number of injured civilians were killed. So and I know by remaining objective as to the blame game here, I probably won't make a lot of friends in the chat. But again, I'm here to give you my thoughts on this. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not Israeli. I'm not Gazan. So all that we really know is that this was a tragic event and that war is a very destructive enterprise. But this is going to have some major repercussions in the Middle East regarding the development of this war and the possibility for a peaceful end being reached very soon. It was just 22 hours ago that the president was to head to Israel and Jordan to try to defuse this situation. Now, I know this guy is a real silver-tongued devil. He's known for his oratory and his diplomatic prowess, but I guess we won't get to see the wonderful outcome of our illustrious leader going to head there to defuse this situation because, not surprisingly, Arab leaders are canceling the Biden summit following this strike as unrest breaks out across the Middle East. And unfortunately, any Arab leaders who were of a mind to go to the negotiating table to bring a peaceful solution to this terrible situation likely no longer have that as an option because of the opinion of the domestic population. So Biden was supposed to visit Jordan, adjacent to Israel here. That's not going to happen anymore. And it's looking like, as a result of this, it's very likely that we may see further escalations. This is likely to devolve into a regional war. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure what the talking heads on mainstream media are reporting about this. Probably a fair amount of fear-mongering and rallying of the population to get us ready for war. And I think that is where we're headed. Thanks, Constitutional Stackers. See the super chat there. Always appreciate those. Everybody who supports the channel. And before we move on to the next piece of information here, which is how this is likely to play out, in my view, please do take a moment just to smash that like button. It really helps get this information out there. And I'm going to try to give you an objective view of things here, which is something I don't think you'll get too much of in the mainstream. So, if you think that's valuable, please do smash that like button. You got Don saying, why the hell are they hitting hospitals in the chat there? And that's a good point. Why are they hitting hospitals? Well, the only reason I can think of that somebody would hit a hospital intentionally here is because it is in their interest to bring about a wider conflict. Of course, disinformation abounds in a time of conflict like this. You can't really trust anything anybody is saying and take it at its face value, but if there are actors here who would like to see this conflict, expand, and obviously some people do have a vested financial interest in that, perhaps they have a geopolitical agenda which would benefit from a widening conflict. And so it's always very important when you're looking for motivations for these things to ask that question, cui bono, who benefits from this? And so, ask yourself that question as you watch all of this play out. That's all I'll really say about that, because I don't know the answer to that question. But, looking at it rationally, I would just try to ask yourself, what does this strike do? Well, it brings the possibility of a much broader conflict and potentially a World War III type scenario to, a higher probability. So certainly not everybody wants to avoid this conflict. And, we've got the Gerald R. Ford here stacking up in the Middle East. You've got a report from Forbes that there will be 2,000 troops possibly deployed to the Middle East. Now, likely this will not be in Israel. This will probably be in some adjacent country, although the list of countries willing to host U.S. troops, I think, probably just got a lot shorter following that strike, as the Arab world, regardless of who was responsible, will absolutely attribute the blame to Israel. And again, I'm not saying that they are responsible, not responsible, whatever, but that will be the view among the Arab nations. And that's likely going to mean that there will be a much broader call for, a bigger conflict here. And the big player, of course, is Iran and Hezbollah. We're going to get into them and what they're saying here in just a moment. First, I do want to take a quick look at the markets. Today, we had silver and gold both putting on a gain, crude oil putting on a gain. I know it says negative here, but actually, if you look at the chart, this is the 5-day chart, you can see we actually added to the gains that we put on last Friday. So not a huge move, but the thing that is very interesting about the fact that silver and gold were up today was that the 10-year yield also rose significantly, now at 4.84. So you can see that it's actually at the highest level that it has been now since 2007. This is the 3-month chart. Let me pull up the total chart here on Yahoo Finance and give you an idea of just how high this is. The last time the 10-year yield was this high was in July of 2007, roundabouts there. And that, of course, was right before the Great Recession hit and the massive financial crisis. Now, what's different between now and that time period? Well, the leverage in the system is massively higher. Obviously, the geopolitical situation now is drastically worse than it was in 2007. I mean, in 2007, remember, China still buying U.S. debt, Japan still buying U.S. debt. What's going on now? Well, everybody is selling U.S. debt, including the Federal Reserve, and as a result, we're seeing rates move up at a rapid pace. I mean, almost 3% move into one trading session today. That's a very big move in the 10-year yield. This is, remember, the most liquid, the most safe, the least volatile asset class out there is what, the mainstream financial folks will tell you. And of course, I'm not a financial advisor. Don't take anything I tell you as financial advice. I'm just some guy on YouTube who likes stacking hard assets outside of this rigged financial system. But keep an eye on this 10-year yield, folks, because this is very, very bad. To see this sell-off in the debt market proceeding now, despite the safe haven bid that we saw following the outbreak of this war last week, the Hamas war with Israel. Now, despite the fact that we are seeing U.S. debt, the rates rising, and actually, probably in light of that, we are seeing the Fed. This is the CME FedWatch tool. And widely anticipated at their next meeting on November 1st to leave rates where they are, to pause. Now, it's very interesting that they're doing this because you have to remember that the inflation numbers for last month, 3.7%. For August, they were 3.7%. So we had 2 months in a row, 3.7% year-over-year increase in the CPI. The numbers for September were hotter than expected. Surprise, surprise. And of course, any of us who go shopping or, spend any money at all, I had to go get some auto maintenance done earlier today. And it's just a reminder of how expensive everything is getting. I mean, the cost of things has not gone up 3.7% year over year. You know that. It's gone up much more than that. But despite the fact that inflation continues to move up, the Fed looking like they're going to pause here. So, why do you think that is? Well, look at what's happening again with the U.S. debt market. The 10-year yield rising almost 3% in one session. They are afraid of a massive credit crisis. They are afraid of things locking up. We got Grumpy One in the chat here. Read what he just said. He said, multiple black swans gathering. Keep powder dry and ready. Yes, I would agree with that. However, here's one caveat I would place in that statement, is that dry powder here doesn't necessarily mean U.S. dollars. Now, I do think it's a good idea to have some cash on hand, to have an emergency fund, of course, because, we don't pay our bills in gold and silver. I think it's a very good idea to have some cash, some dry powder, as he says, in case we get some kind of a pan sell-off event where the price of everything tumbles, because, the response to that will be the Fed running the printing presses out of control to bring rates down and try to save everything. We know that that's what they're going to do. Just look at what they did back in March. They launched the Bank Term Funding Program. They got bailouts with the FDIC for all these bank depositors. So very likely they will bail things up. But if you see a pan sell-off, it's not financial advice, but I'll be taking some of my cash if we see a crash, say, in the price of oil or gold or silver. I will be scooping up some more of those hard assets. But dry powder here actually, I think, could kind of meet in a way gold or silver, because remember, gold and silver, they're not really investments after all. They are money themselves. They're just hard money. They're not the fiat currency. So I think that, very likely, should we see a massive financial crisis, a sovereign debt crisis, which we are approaching every day, every time the yield on the 10-year rises like this, we get a little bit closer. Remember, we got all these insolvent banks out there. Just because the Middle East is descending into conflict doesn't mean that the banking crisis, which is still in effect, has gotten any better. It's just a distraction, and it could have some major implications for the financial system, but just because this is happening and all our eyes are turned there, it doesn't mean any of the problems at home have been solved. Now, we did see a big rise, like I said, in silver and gold back on Friday. They appear to be holding on to those gains. Some of the miners, First Majestic Silver, I just happen to have the ticker here on my screen, but up 5% today. So I think, these assets, people are really beginning to understand what this end game is going to look like. And, I'll continue stacking gold and silver right now, whether the price moves up, down, or sideways, because I think hard assets are going to be the place to be when all of this plays out. If you want to get some gold or silver, make sure you check out today's video sponsor, sdbullion.com. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. So check them out if you'd like to support this channel. One of the best ways you can do that is support our sponsors. Okay, so why is it a big deal that the Arab world now seems to be getting incensed against the collective West? I mean, we've basically pushed the Arab world now into bed with the global South as a whole. The BRICS nations, China, Russia. This crisis in the Middle East is stacking the deck against the United States. And yes, it's true. We do have 2 aircraft carriers in the region, and we may be able to project a significant amount of force there. But, one problem is that we don't have any money to do that with. We're broke. Any conflict we get involved there is going to be very significant, but we may not have much of a choice because Iran has warned that they may take preemptive action against Israel. We covered yesterday about how these IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard troops from Iran, arguably the more, how do we want to say this? They're the more, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but they're not as secular, let's say, as the Iranian army. They're a little bit more ideologically driven. That's what I'm looking for here. And they are accumulating in Lebanon and Syria. They've been moving troops into position. We've seen already Israel has launched airstrikes against the Syrian airports, multiple airports in Syria, attempting to disrupt the flow and positioning of Iranian weapons into those border regions of Israel. And now Iran saying that they may take preemptive action as Israel readies for a ground offensive on the Gaza Strip. Now, it looks like the Israelis may be hesitating a little bit here to launch this ground invasion, although obviously the bombardment continuing and the strikes are continuing. So, could this hospital strike be a trigger for Iran to launch a preemptive strike? Anybody's guess, but, if you need a casus belli, a reason to go to war, the bombing of a hospital is, as good as any. There have been wars fought over much less. So this is certainly a very alarming situation here. Rolf Steiner says Russia and China are arming Iran and other Muslim nations now. Yeah, that's certainly possible. I would not be surprised if some Iranian military units are equipped with Chinese or Russian technology. They've been moving much more closely together in recent years, and that would not surprise me one bit. That's just speculation, of course, but I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case. Iran has been allegedly arming the Russian military in Ukraine with advanced drones, so why wouldn't it be the other way around? You got 39th in the chat there saying, like the video. Yes, please, like the video, folks. Always appreciate that. All right. Also, Iran Guard. So this is an IRGC commander. Remember, these are the slightly more ideologically driven troops of Iran, so likely, I don't know if they'd be used as shock troops or whatever, but perhaps the morale among the IRGC a little bit higher than the regular Iranian army. These are the folks who have been put in place. They're tasked with protecting the integrity of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. So they have been quoted, an Iranian Revolutionary Guards commander quoted as saying the resistance front's shocks against the Zionist regime, which is how they refer to Israel, will continue until this cancerous tumor is eradicated from the world map. Now, it's nothing new for Iran to have fairly bellicose rhetoric. Again, you got to take this in context, but then he also said this: another shockwave is on the way if Israel does not end atrocities in Gaza. So what is a shockwave? Well, I'm assuming he's referring to the Hamas attacks of the past weekend. So it's possible that you could see Hezbollah launching a very massive attack against Israel here. They have a very formidable fighting force there. Their numbers have increased dramatically since the 2006 war that Israel fought against them, and they had a fairly difficult time that time around. Well, now I believe there's something to the tune of 100,000 hardcore Hezbollah fighters trained and equipped by Iran. So this is, a very big deal. They've got thousands of rockets, and, the IDF, the Israeli military, already has a significant task that they're undertaking in Hamas, and it'll be very difficult for them to fight a two-front war. And that's why if this does pop off, it'll draw the U.S. in right away, probably. In Ukraine, ostensibly, so far, U.S. forces have not gotten involved, despite the fact that we've been arming and equipping the Ukrainians. But this could be the conflict that really draws the U.S. into a hot war in a big way. We've got the USS Gerald Ford with the whole carrier strike group stationed there in the Eastern Mediterranean. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, a second carrier strike group moving into the area. So that is a lot of firepower. It's also a very significant target. So, it's a double-edged sword. Of course, there are events in the past where we've seen things like this be used as a casus belli for the U.S. forces, in Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin. You can look that up if you are curious about getting a history lesson on these FF type events, but that's something that we need to look out for as well. There very well could be something right around the corner. And, we may never know the truth about what ultimately happens, but if it's used to create a larger regional war, it will have a significant effect on us. First thing that's going to happen if this thing pops up is the price of crude oil is going to skyrocket and inflation is going to run out of control. So if you are not prepared for that type of an event, you may want to consider at least some of the possibilities here. Imagine if you were to go to the gas station and they didn't have fuel, or fuel was suddenly drastically more expensive, or there's any number of things that could, create for us here, shortages, rationing, etc. But, the time to get prepared is now, folks, because as, unstable as things are, we're still, we haven't crossed the ultimate red line here. And when we do, I think that, things like long-term storage food, water, precious metals, all of those are going to become a lot more difficult to get your hands on. So you can recall in 2020, everybody panicking and beating up people in lines at stores to get their hands on some toilet paper. Well, you don't want to be in that crowd, look, most people are not going to get prepared. I understand that, but I think that the audience of this channel is, a little bit higher on the end of the preparedness and awareness curve. And so, yeah, someone saying lost respect, unsubscribed for this video. Well, I call them as I see them, man. I'm sorry if I've said something that has caused you to unsubscribe here, but I'm just trying to, cover this and get this message out there. And not everybody's going to like it, but in a divisive time like this, you can't please everybody. And, if you're watching this for the first time and you'd like to see more videos like this, consider subscribing to the channel. And, I'm going to do my best to relay the information for as long as I can. Hopefully, voices like my own and others, I'm a relatively tiny voice here on social media, but I hope we don't get silenced. But in times of war, information control becomes very important. So we will see. Also, this is from Axios. White House has discussed U.S. military response if Hezbollah attacks Israel. Now, this is kind of like one of these statements, like, duh, why else would we be moving 2 carrier strike groups into the region if we weren't considering at least using them? Because otherwise they are just big, juicy targets and, might not have much utility. But yeah, if Hezbollah attacks, the U.S. will almost certainly get involved, and then all bets are off. There's other things that we need to think about here. If this conflict breaks into a, larger conflict, the U.S. gets involved, who's to say that the other hotspots won't take that opportunity to, pop things off, like I'm talking about in the South China Sea? Who's to say China won't decide to use the distraction of the U.S. being involved in 2 theaters of war to carry out what they've wanted to do in Taiwan for a long time? Who's to say that in North Korea they won't decide that now's the time, this is their opportunity? So this is not shaping up to be a very good situation here. So listen, get prepared. Do what you can. Get prepared for much higher inflation and much higher energy prices. I think that's probably going to be the number one impact here, but that could very well be the thing that triggers a massive collapse. So, get some hard assets. Make sure your basic needs are taken care of. Get as independent of systems of support as you can, folks, because looks like the crap may be about to hit the fan. Anyway, that's really all I have for you tonight. I'll take a look at the chat here. We live in a police state. Someone's saying, yeah, I hope YouTube. I'm just reading somebody saying that in the chat there. But, well, I don't know if I'd go that far, but we do have infringements on our liberties and freedoms now that certainly didn't exist in the past. And if we go to war, that's probably not going to change. In fact, war is typically a time when individual liberty is usurped for a more collectivist view of things. And, if you are prepared, also get ready to not be that popular. That's also something I would say. If we descend into chaos here and you're somebody who is not suffering as much as the majority of the population because you had foresight to, get yourself prepared for it, you might want to keep that to yourself, because I don't think that you're going to be particularly popular as a result. I see C130 in the chat there. Thank you very much, C130, sir. Good to see you. I see a lot of names that are regularly on this chat, and I always appreciate everybody who comes in here. Shelly Werner, thank you so much for the kind words there. I appreciate your support. And, I know these are contentious issues. I try not to trigger people as much as possible, but sometimes the truth is divisive. And, I don't, certainly everything I'm saying here, take it all with a grain of salt. Don't trust what I'm saying. Again, I'm just some guy. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. But it seems like a lot of the population kind of walks around with a veil over their eyes, and they've all got TikTok brain. And, if you talk about this stuff, people just look at you like you're crazy. And it's kind of an odd situation that we find ourselves in. But certainly the population has been conditioned to be docile and servile at this point. And so, a lot of people aren't going to be getting prepared. But don't fall into that camp. And just understand, this is a great community we have here. You can all interact in the comments and in the chat with one another on the community page. Follow me on Twitter, by the way, if you haven't done that yet, at StackSmarter. I don't post there a ton, but I do get engaged sometimes there. And when I see that people have mentioned me or interacted with me, I always try to respond. So Twitter is a good place to follow me and to build this community up, because it's going to be very important, I think, to at least communicate with like-minded people who are paying attention to all this, just so you don't feel like you're going crazy. I mean, it's part of why I like these live streams, because, not a lot of people are paying attention, if you ask me, based on my experience with folks I know in the general public. Gomers44 says, good you are staying neutral. We don't know WTH is really going on. Too many conflicting agendas at play. Keep your powder dry. Yes, sir. Those are very wise words indeed. And, listen, folks, guaranteed, if you're a human being, you're fallible, just like me, just like the rest of us. And, there are these things that you have really strong convictions about. And if you have an open mind, there's probably things that you had really strong convictions about in the past that you may have changed your mind on. And if you haven't ever done that, you might want to reconsider that approach. And, you should always be open to new pieces of information and understand that none of the mainstream sources of information can be relied on to give you truth or accurate information. I mean, they give you a piece of the puzzle, and you've got to take that and interpret it how you will. But anyway, yeah, fog of war is real, as Silver Shire says there. None of us know the truth, but one thing's for sure. One thing that is true is that you have got to get prepared. And, if this doesn't, I hope that nothing comes of this. I mean, I really do. I truly do, because it's horrific when you see what's going on over in the Middle East, and you think about these people who were there through no fault of their own on either side. I mean, and suffering these horrible fates, this unbelievable cruelty, and it's really horrible. But at the same time, we can't let our emotions get the best of us, and you have got to avoid falling into this divide and conquer mindset, I believe, which is used to turn us against each other on trivial matters, when in reality, the folks pulling the strings here are the ones who foment these things, and they don't have your best interests at heart. And you got to keep that in mind. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling on here enough. I'm going to wrap this up, but I do just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who tuned in. Please, everybody, stay safe. Do your best to get prepared, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.